broadcastnews.com, live and direct from United Nations headquarters in New York City. And this is Out of Africa. Joining us today is one of the most accomplished young diplomats at the United Nations. Young, I say, because he's younger than this anchor, Ambassador Noel Nelson Maison. The ambassador is particularly noted for what was perhaps the most subtle, delicate, and professional diplomacy seen in a long time when, as the president of the Security Council, he worked through and got resolutions on Libya passed, and the difficult business of getting a renomination of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon. His skill and his thoughtfulness were appreciated by people on both sides of these contentious issues, and that's a rare thing. Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you, John.
Recently, your country was elected to the United Nations Human Rights Council, one of the newer innovations at the United Nations. It replaced an older organization that had become highly riven with ideology and is now a key player, at least in the public arena, as what we might say a public intellectual force, a force of moral suasion, a force particularly in Europe and in Africa, which carries a good deal of weight. What are you looking forward to as a nation, as a prosperous African nation, to doing in the Council?
John, thanks a lot for this opportunity to speak about our recent election in the Human Rights Council, which is actually our third mandate in the Human Rights Council, equal to the number of our mandates in the Security Council too. First of all, let me say that this is really a recognition of the progress that a country such as Gabon has been able to achieve in the realm of human rights. And of course, there are still many challenges to deal with in the future. But it is also an incentive to continue to do more, not only at the national level, but also at the international level. We just completed our universal periodic review on October 23rd. We were able to report that the 30 recommendations that were made in the previous review were actually achieved and realized. This time around, we received about 115 recommendations. We agreed on 105 of those, but we really value these recommendations because it's also a measure of how far we still have to go, but also how much we've done so far.
Gabon's a relatively new independent country,
Yes.
August
Yes.
1960, if I
Yes,
recall
1960,
correctly.
yes, August.
And I think besides the recommendations, what I found significant is while Gabon is not perfect, for instance, it's still ranked above 100 of the countries with problems according to Reporters Without Borders. Human Rights Watch says that Gabon was among the nations with a clean slate recommended for the Human Rights Council. And Human Rights Watch is a pretty tough grouping of people. Gabon frequently is called the quiet or the healthy corner of a very disturbed neighborhood in Africa. And it's a model in some ways. I mean, high what about? Almost $9,000 a year,
Sure.
average income, and
Absolutely.
not a lot of civil strife, and
absolutely.
not notorious corruption. I mean, it's not as uncorrupt as North Korea, but then again,
Absolutely.
North Korea is a pretty horrible place.
Yes.
But it really is a relief from many of the stories that we're reporting all the time about Africa. I can't remember the last time I reported on a journalist being killed or detained in Gabon. And, you know, sometimes negative proof is good proof.
John, you know, there are some critics who still contend that there is a problem with freedom of the media, of the press in Gabon. But to me, it's just a problem of some of these critics not really knowing what the reality is. Testimony is just the number of newspapers, critical newspapers that you have in the country by African standards is just amazing. And the freedom of tone, sometimes, you know, on the verge of outrageous. And these journalists are able to do it without fearing anything. The only thing that we try to rein in is to ensure that with the lessons that we've learned from other countries on how the media actually stir civil strife, to ensure that the media is a responsible media. Even the critical media should be responsible. They should work towards strengthening nationhood and strengthening the peace that we've been able to maintain for quite a number of years, and not stir civil strife as we've seen some journalists and the media do in some other countries. This is the only thing that we really try to watch for. But other than that, you know, the number of television stations and radio stations.
And there's a television station,
yeah,
if I remember correctly,
yeah,
in the hands of maybe it's the former defense minister, the defense minister who's quite a rival now to the president.
Absolutely. And that TV station is broadcasting freely and
of course, as the internet penetration gets
Absolutely.
greater,
Absolutely.
the francophone country, you have all the resources of France coming in.
Absolutely. But John, human rights is more than freedom of media or freedom of speech. I mean, human rights, it's a whole array of things that we try to promote. We try to make sure that they happen. For example, when one talks about discrimination, gender discrimination, this is something we don't have. There is no salary discrimination between men and women in Gabon. For the same job, a man gets equal pay as a man.
Is this going to be an issue that Gabon is going to bring up in the Human Rights Council? I know a couple weeks ago, Ambassador Brown had this petition signed by 2 million people saying that it was Malala Day, named in honor of that young girl from Pakistan. And our Islamic brothers and sisters aren't universal in their belief in the education of females. Is that going to be the kind of issue you're going to bring up in the Human Rights Council?
Obviously, at the national level, we want to make sure that there is no gender discrimination in Gabon. And in our view, there shouldn't be gender discrimination elsewhere. And we will try to have a constructive dialogue on these issues with all the other members of the council. Education is another area where we don't have such discrimination. I would even mention something that people don't talk about. We received refugees from neighboring countries, you know, countries that had to deal with civil strife, and those refugees were treated just as Gabonese. Same access to health services, same access to education, same access to
So if you were a refugee from, let's say, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, you could go to Omar Bongo University?
Of course. Of course, there is no discrimination.
So that's
There is
actually
no,
better than some of the
there is no,
Americans. They were,
yeah,
I
yeah,
remember in the Republican
yeah,
presidential debate, they were fighting about
yeah.
whether Mexican immigrants who are illegal could go to the University of Texas and pay in-state tuition. So maybe you've got something to teach some of our educators and statesmen here.
In Gabon, the refugees do not suffer any such discrimination, whether it's for access to education, access to health, or any other public services that there is. So this is another area where we feel that we've been able to make good. There are other issues. There's been a debate on human trafficking, women, children trafficking. What people need to realize is Gabon is a transit country, a destination for many other countries who feel that they can succeed or they can improve their lives by coming to live in Gabon. So some of this phenomenon is really brought in Gabon from the outside, and we try our best to make sure that the law is abided by and that people don't come in Gabon and without consequences practice
well, in your neighborhood there's an awful lot of that. There's a wonderful woman, I don't know if you've met her, over at UNICEF named Pernilla Ironside, who was in the Democratic Republic of Congo for a long time, dealing both with victims of rape, but for a long time with young boys and young girls who were forced to become soldiers and trying to re-educate them. Do you find that because that's not so far from you, that the issue of child soldiers and virtual slave labor for armies is closer and nearer and dearer to the hearts of the policymakers in Gabon?
Oh, of course. Anything that has to do with protecting children, of course, has to be one of our priorities in the Human Rights Council. We ourselves, at the national level, took some measures, to protect children or even incarcerated children, to protect them in the carceral environment. So anything that has to do with protecting the integrity of children will be on our priority. It would be one of the issues that we will be engaging with other members of the council. And of course, turning to another aspect, one thing that we're particularly proud of is we've been able to abolish capital punishment. So
really?
That's of course, that we've been able to do, and with bipartisan, both the Senate and the lower chamber were able to agree on that. So that's
remarkable.
That's a good
it's remarkable, particularly in a week where just this week we heard quite quietly that the Indians hung one of the people who was involved in the Mumbai uprising or terrorist act. Anything else that's particularly unusual about the priorities you're going to be trying to push in the council?
Well, there is. We were able to have passed a resolution of the General Assembly about 2 years ago protecting widows. Why? Because in many of our countries, the laws and the judicial system was not very forceful in protecting widows from enjoying inheritance and whatever rights they had once the husband passed
come
away.
Out of tribal tradition more than out of the French law tradition that was imposed on the country?
I think it has to do with the cultural backgrounds and what was traditionally considered to be the place of women in society. And today we cannot tolerate anything that would infringe on the rights of women, being it inheritance or anything else. So this was for us an important issue to take to the global level so that widows all over the world, where they may suffer discrimination, from cultural and other practices that their inheritance is denied to them. So that's something we want to push forward. And
that's fascinating because we know that the first time in written history that we've seen the word freedom was in what's now Iraq, about 9 centuries BC, when they talked about freedom for the protection of widows and their children.
Yes.
So you're bringing something back that is at the very basic, at the fundamental part of our notions of what a free world is about.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But before we leave, since we're talking about a free world, let's talk about an unfree world. You're a sensitive observer of politics, particularly those at the UN and in Africa. The foreign ministers of the European Union have just met and endorsed a plan of the African Union and the Organization of Northeast African States to put troops in to try and undo the extremism that's been visited on northern Mali. Where do you see this going? What do we need to understand about the problems plaguing Mali?
It's really a combination of problem, as one may observe in some African countries where nationhood is still fragile, still has to be strengthened because of the diversity, the cultural diversity, and because of the way the modern economy, the globalized economy has disrupted equilibria that existed amongst groups in these societies, and that the modern state has not yet been able to deal with in a very effective way. So these are really fundamental problems that have consequences on security, on the way different groups of the population interact, and what their concerns and interests are. That said, Mali is facing a security problem that has to be dealt with. Anything else wouldn't be achieved unless we deal with the security problem. The territorial integrity of Mali has to be reestablished.
An integrity that was violated when all these people from Mali and some other areas just came flowing south after Libya was torn apart.
Absolutely. So that has to be a priority to reestablish the territorial integrity of Mali. One. Second, the institutions have to be reestablished and later on strengthened. And then there has to be some kind of a political process to discuss and to take into account the concerns and the preoccupations of all these groups in the north that have been claiming certain privileges and certain rights for many years now. And as far as the UN involvement is concerned, Mali should be a good case to initiate new thinking on how we conduct these peace missions.
So we're beyond thinking about the terms that we used to think about, decolonialization.
Right.
We're beyond thinking about the old Cold War paradigms. What do we need to think about?
I think we need development. Sustainable development has to be at the core of whatever action we take, even if at the beginning it has to do with reestablishing security, reestablishing the peace in the country. But sustainable development has to be the core of what we do once peace is established and once security is back to a certain minimum level. There's been a lot of debate as far as Mali is concerned on the exit strategy. The Security Council saying, well, we need to have an exit strategy. But durably solving the problem or durably helping Mali has to be beyond the exit strategy of the UN mission there. What has to be done next require that we think about it also, and that's really the other side and the other piece of the puzzle.
Well, I hope that as new thoughts about a new paradigm in this new world, and sadly in Mali, a country, an Islamic country that was really beginning to find its way in the world and suddenly found it disrupted. As the thoughts occur to you, I hope you'll come back to discuss them with us here on ICAST News. I appreciate your coming, Mr.
Thank you, John.
Ambassador.
Thank you, John.
Thank you so very much, and
Thank you, John,
for your very good work.
Thank you.
For ICASTnews.com, live and direct from the United Nations in New York City. For Out of Africa, I'm Jonathan Sanders.
Good. Thank you.